You know, I've been playing guitar since I was 13. I was raised in Kentucky. Well, first I was born in Texas, raised in Texas. Then I moved to Kentucky when I was young. And in Kentucky, I learned to play the guitar from my neighbor. And I was always, and I lived in a really rural town in Kentucky called Catlettsburg, Kentucky. And the neighbor played like in Merle Travis style. So I learned guitar as 13. And pretty much after that, about 2 years later, we moved to LA, and then I went to the big city where I learned rock and roll guitars. So I have a lot of country influence. And why I was here in California, I became quite a good guitarist. So I really got into jazz guitar. And when I was 17, I got to take lessons with Joe Pass, who's one of the better known jazz guitarists. And I took a few private lessons from him. And I went to college as a music major, as a classical guitar major, but also to study also study jazz guitar. But I got into rockabilly around that time, around 16, 17, because rockabilly is actually, which a lot of people know, it's country guitar, which is like the Merle Travis stuff I first learned. It's also a lot of that Western swing, which they were Southern jazz guitarists who played Western swing. They had Bob Wells and them had horns, so there's a lot of jazz influence in rockabilly. And obviously rockabilly being from the R&B roots, it's a lot of blues. So playing rockabilly, you can play jazz, you can play blues, or you can play country, which is all the three things I loved. The only thing you don't get to play really distorted Jimi Hendrix style guitar, which I also love, but you can always try to incorporate it. But rockabilly to me is the perfect music, because I can go off and play blues solos and it fits perfect. I can play jazz solos and people think it's phenomenal, or I can play country stuff and it's great. Well, the way I met Slim Jim is when Levi and me started the band, the Ripcords. Brian Setzer was in a band called the Bloodless Pharaohs, and Brian Setzer and his brother Gary Setzer were flown out from New York to start the Ripcords with me and Levi. So it was me and Levi, Brian Setzer, and Gary Setzer was playing drums. And I forget the name of the bass player, but he later on went on to be in that band, the swing band. What were they called? Royal Crown Review. I think his name was Adam Stern, and he was like 17 years old. I was like 20. I turned 20, and Levi was 20, and so and Brian, I guess, was 21. We were all pretty young, and our manager flew them out, and we rehearsed for like 2 weeks. And Brian and Gary went back to New York to pack their things to meet, and they were gonna meet us in London. But after they got back to New York, Brian called and said the Bloodless Pharaohs were getting signed to CBS, and so it was a bad time for him to go to London. So the Ripcords became a four-piece without Brian. We got another drummer, and we went to London. After we'd been in London like 4 or 5 months, and we were actually starting to get big in the clubs, I'm walking down Portobello Road one day, and Brian Setzer's there, and he goes, Danny, and I go, Brian, he goes, I'm here with my band. I go, the Bloodless Pharaohs. He said, no, I'm here with my other band, the Tomcats. And he goes, I want you to meet, this is my drummer, Slim Jim. And I remember Slim Jim had a cane. And he was like limps up on a cane, and he's like a 17-year-old guy, really. And I remember thinking, what's this young guy got a cane for? I later found out that the first day that the Tomcats arrived in London, Jim had sprained his ankle. So that's all I remember about meeting Jim was he was on a cane, and he's like this young guy like walking around like with this old person's cane, and Lee was with him too, and that's when I first met Jim. And then from then on, I went to the Stray Cats show. They became big really quick over there. After about the 7th show, they got signed, and they came to some of our shows as well. And so we all like met over in London. And so I've known Slim Jim now for like 21 years. I know Brian for probably 22. I met him like about 6 months before. And now Lemmy, there's a club in London still there called Dingwalls, which is a really cool club, and a lot of rockabilly bands, blues bands, punk bands, a lot of bands got their start there. And the Ripcords, once we became big enough, after about 4 months, we could headline Dingwalls. The first time we played there, Lemmy was there. And I wasn't a big fan of Motorhead. Not that I was anything against him, I just hadn't listened to him. But I had actually in high school listened to Hawkwind, which was Lemmy's first band, which was like this psychedelic band. And my friends in high school used to listen to him. So I knew Lemmy from Hawkwind. He was the bass player on Hawkwind. And he came to the show, and plus I knew him from the press. So he came to our show, and it's like all these kids with quiffs, these young English kids. At the time, the rock was singing in London was probably the kids were like 15 to 18 years old. It was a very young crowd. But there's Lemmy, and he's playing a video game. So the first thing I did is I told the bass player, I want to go up and meet Lemmy. He's from Hawkwind, right? So I go up and he's playing a video game, and I wait until he loses all his men. I think he's playing like Asteroids was the game then. It was a very primitive video game. But then I introduced myself, and he's like, oh yeah, and I go, he said, I heard you're playing, I love rockabilly, a big fan of rockabilly. So I said, come backstage and meet Levi. And so me and Bobby, who's our bass player, we walked him backstage. But Dingwalls is not really backstage. We're kind of standing half on the stage and half like in the dressing room talking. And all these people start gathering around, because they're going, there's Lemmy. So Lemmy goes, I'm not being rude, but I'm going to go back to the back so you guys can get ready, because I seem to be getting too much attention. I don't want people to be concentrating on me. And so that was it. Then from then on, every time we played in that part of London, which is Camden Town, Lemmy would be at the show. And he'd say hi, and we'd always go say hi. And we actually learned this old Johnny Guitar Watson song called Motorhead Baby, that the Ripcord started doing live, that we dedicate to Lemmy every time we played. So, I didn't really become friends with Lemmy except to the extent that he would come to our shows and he was a fan. And that's how I first met Lemmy. So about the mid-90s, me and Slim Jim started playing together in a band called 13 Cats, which was a singer from the Polecats, who's also at the time they were a big band at the same time as the Stray Cats were in England, and they'd had a couple English hits. And then we were in the Ripcords, and Smutty had been in the original Levi and the Rock Cats. So we started this band, 13 Cats, which was supposed to be a quote-unquote super group of members, Stray Cats, the Polecats, and the Rock Cats. And so we were playing together. So me and Slim Jim started working. Me and Slim Jim hit it off good playing together. And we actually we started to try to think of other projects to do together. And so Cleopatra asked us, said, why don't we do it like a swing record? And we did a swing record, but it's not really a swing record. It's more like a blues record, and we got a sax player to play on some songs. But we got Lee Rocker to play bass. So it's basically me, Slim Jim, and Lee Rocker. And we did an album called The Swing Cats, which came out on Cleopatra. And then we were asked to do a second album, a tribute to Elvis. But by that time, Lee had become too busy in his solo project, so me and Slim Jim did it ourselves. So we decided to get all the people we knew together. So we got Lemmy to sing on it. We got Johnny Ramone to play guitar. We got Michael DeBar to sing. We got Kathy Valentine from the Go-Go's to play on it, and this girl, what's her name, Christy Ellen Harris, who was on a show called Sunset Beach at the time. It was a big soap opera, so she sang on it, and Jamie James used to be in the King Bees. So we got all our friends to play on it. And we decided that Lemmy and Johnny Ramone should play together on the same tracks with us. So we worked out Good Rockin' Tonight and Viva Las Vegas, and Johnny picked the songs. So the day that we go to, so Johnny came in and laid his guitar parts down. Then the day that Lemmy came in to sing, he sang Good Rockin' Tonight, and he said, I'm not going to sing Viva Las Vegas. He said, I don't like to sing that. So he said, but since he'd promised us 2 songs, he said, well, let's get some acoustic guitars and let's do Trying to Get You. That's an Elvis song. And so we did Trying to Get You, and we did All Shook Up. We did 2, so he did 2 Elvis songs acoustic, and they were great. It was just Lemmy playing acoustic, I was playing bass, Jim was playing drums. And then so he also played Good Rockin' Tonight, the song with Johnny Ramone, and then the other song, Good Viva Las Vegas, we did as an instrumental with me and Johnny Ramone, because Lemmy wouldn't sing it. But we liked the acoustic songs so much that we decided that Lemmy was really into it and said, well, let's see if they'll let us do a whole record, just the 3 of us. So we did a record for Cleopatra, which came out as, it was Lemmy, Slim Jim, and Danny B. And from that, we did the album. Then I think the first time Jim opened up his club, the Cat Club, the first New Year's Eve, which is the millennium, 2000 New Year's Eve, 1999, 2000, Jim got me, Lemmy, to play there. So we did a show at the Cat Club then. Then about a year later, we got Lee Rocker to play bass, and we did another show at the Cat Club. And at that particular one, there's lots of press there, and it got good write-ups all over the place about that one. So Brian Pereira at Cleopatra, who put out the record, asked us to do a live DVD. So at the time, we said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. So it's been like a year with the making of this. We worked out the details over a year ago. Then Lemmy was very busy. Motorhead had been touring with Iron Maiden for a long time. Jim's has his band Dead Man Walking. He's been playing in England, so he's been in England a lot touring. I've been doing lots of soundtracks here. So till New Year's Eve of this year. On New Year's Eve, Lemmy called up Jim and said, "I'm available." And Jim said, "I'm available." And he called me on New Year's Eve and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm available." So we had a 2-week window to get it together. And it's a miraculous we did it. So after I got the call from Lemmy to do the show, we went real quickly. We powwowed on the phone, me, Slim Jim, and Lemmy, and we worked out a set list. And then I got this bass player, Johnny Bowler, who used to be in a big English band, a psychobilly band called the Guanabats. And he happens to live out here in San Diego, so we thought he'd be perfect for it. So we we made a set list over the phone. I emailed Johnny the set list, and he went out and bought some of the records he didn't have, and we all separately learned the songs. So a Monday night before, the show was on a Tuesday night, so the Monday night before, we finally all four got together, and then we meant to rehearse like 5 hours, but we actually only rehearsed every song once, and to do the show at the Cat Club on January 13th, which is what they filmed for the DVD. So we were actually kind of nervous about doing this show because we never really got through all the songs that well. But the show turned out great. It was, I guess I was the most nervous because I thought, how's everyone who's never played together, or we played together, but not for years. But we did a set list which is anything like we'd done before. There's only 2 songs on that set list that's from the actual record, and it turned out great. I thought. Hopefully everyone else thinks so. The first song we did that night was "Good Rockin' Night," which is the song we did on the original Elvis, the Swing Cats tribute to Elvis that we did. We did "Lawdy Miss Clawdy," which is another Elvis song, because Lemmy's a big fan of Elvis, and he's a gigantic fan of Buddy Holly, and on the record we did mainly Buddy Holly songs. The reason we didn't do a lot of Buddy Holly songs that night is because we didn't have time to rehearse the backing vocals, and Lemmy likes it to be right. If we're going to do Buddy Holly, he doesn't want it to sound like a bar band. He wants it to sound professional, and me and Jim are going, well, we can't sing backups without rehearsing, and so a lot of the Buddy Holly songs were scrapped except for 2, but that was the second song, "Lawdy Miss Clawdy," which is also an old blues song. The third song we did was "I'm Talking About You." I think that's the title, and I know that from that was one of the Yardbirds' first recordings. Also, the Rolling Stones did it, but it's actually a Chuck Berry song. So I know the Yardbirds version, Jim knows the Rolling Stones version, and Lemmy knows the original Chuck Berry version. So that's why the version we do on this CD is very interesting. On this DVD, it's because both the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds stay close to the original, and so we were all able to communicate once we decided this is the right key to do. The fourth song is the Eddie Cochran song, "Something Else," which is it's one of Eddie Cochran's best songs. It's been done by punk bands, hard rock bands. I think Sid Vicious recorded that as one of his solo songs before he died, and there's a video of him doing "Something Else." And I think he was still in the set. It's in the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Sid Vicious sings it, because even though it's a song from the 50s, it's a really tough song, and we always loved to jam on that. So that was a great. Lemmy picked that one. It was a great choice, I thought. The fifth song we did was "Reeling and a Rocking," which is another Chuck Berry song, which I've never played that much Chuck Berry, and we never did it before when we played together. But Lemmy wanted to do a lot of Chuck Berry that night. But "Reeling and Rocking" was, it's a song I've heard a lot, but I've never played it, but it turned out really great. It was a real rocking song, and I'm actually a big fan of the song now. Because I know all the hits of Chuck Berry, and I know he did 50 records, so there's 50 albums, so there's tons of stuff that I never heard. And this is one of the ones I don't hear that often. Then Lemmy broke a string, which wasn't planned. After that, we came back and did our first Buddy Holly song, "Fool's Paradise," which is from an album that Lemmy says is the first album he ever bought, a Buddy Holly and the Crickets album, and it's a really rocking song, especially the way we do it. It's even rocking the way Buddy Holly did it, because a lot of people think Buddy Holly is more of a pop artist. They think of him but he could really rock with anyone. He was a real rock and roller too. Then we did another Chuck Berry song, "Bye Bye Johnny," which is another. I think the Stones cut that on one of their first albums or one of their first singles, and it's a song. It's the same thing. I know the Rolling Stones version, and I'd heard the Chuck Berry version, but he knows the Chuck Berry's version backwards and forward. Now the interesting thing, we did a song called "Sick and Tired" by Fats Domino, which me or Slim Jim or Johnny, the bass player, had never heard of. Fats Domino, but Lemmy knew this song, and I think it's an obscure Fats Domino song, and I have a Fats Domino box set, and it's on, which is his complete recordings for Imperial, so it's on there. But it was a song that, like, I don't think I've heard anyone ever do it before. And when you think of Fats Domino, you think of Blue Monday, or you think of, you know, some of his other hits. But this is a song that Lemmy picked, and it's a great song. And you know, he picked it, so we had to really struggle to find a copy. And Johnny had never heard it, so I had to email Johnny an MP3 of it so he could hear it, so he could learn the song. But what a great song, though. I'm sick and tired. And then we did Bad Boy, which is actually a Larry Williams song, but obviously the Beatles had a big hit with it. It's a Beatles, one of their early singles. It's on all their early records, and you always think of Bad Boy from that. A lot of people don't know Larry Williams' version of it. And I think even on the DVD that night, I think on the concert that night, Lemmy said, we're going to do the Beatles version of a Larry Williams song. And so we did Bad Boy. Then we did Matchbox, which is a Carl Perkins song, but it's been done by everyone. You know, it was also done by the Beatles. I think that was one of the ones that Ringo sang on the early Beatles record. But we do a really tough version of it, Matchbox. And we also recorded it on that album we did a couple years ago. So, oh, then we did Back in the USA, which is another Chuck Berry song. And it's just one of his big hits, so everyone knew that one. And the funny thing is about Chuck Berry is his songs, everyone always thinks of Johnny Be Good, and I think that night that we were doing the concert, Lemmy kept making reference to the fact that we're not going to do any of the songs that everyone knows. We didn't do Maybelline, we didn't do Johnny Be Good, we didn't do Roll Over Beethoven, but I think a couple times Lemmy said, we're not doing Johnny Be Good, we're not doing the famous Chuck Berry songs, we're doing obscure one. So this one isn't quite as obscure as I would think it is, but it is one of his better, it's a little bit better known than I Ain't Talking About You or those songs. Oh, then we did You Got Me Dizzy, which originally on the record Lemmy played harmonica solo, and a lot of people know Lemmy is a really good blues harmonica player. And if you ever pick up the CD, you can hear him playing it. And that night, he got a harmonica, but he got a harmonica in the wrong key. And so I guess it got confusion. So he showed up with the harmonica at sound check, and we got in the back, and we realized he had the wrong key. Then Slim Jim sent someone down to Guitar Center to buy a harmonica in the right key, but they closed. So Lemmy didn't get to play harmonica that night. So then Lemmy decided we're not going to do the song tonight. But the last minute, it was an encore song, I believe. He decided, let's go ahead and do it. But it was supposed to be part of the set. But it would have been great to see Lemmy, because Lemmy, he just lets his guitar hang around his back, and he plays harmonica, and he looks like an old blues guy. When he did it on the record, he said, because no one ever thinks Lemmy can play harmonica. And he goes, when we were doing the record, he said, I'll play harmonica. And we like, you can't play harmonica. And he pulls it out, and he's like, you can play harmonica great. And I wish it would have been filmed, but that's the way it is. There's no blues harp in the key of A. So then the last song we did was Blue Suede Shoes, which was pretty much, that's one of one of Elvis's first hits, Carl Perkins' first hits. It's a song that everyone associates with the 50s and rock and roll and rockabilly. So what a proper way to close the concert. But I hope that the people learn a lot about Lemmy. Lemmy's been a big fan of rockabilly for a long time. This was a great concert, a lot of fun, and in retrospect, I wish we did this more often. And the thing is, Lemmy's so busy, and he's, and whenever we get involved with this, Lemmy gets so excited, and we're all like really excited. We have such a great time. Like that night, we went back up into the office. We're sitting around, and Lemmy's like, "Okay, we're going to book some more shows. We should take this out and do a whole tour when his DVD comes out." And I just hope something like that happens. But I know, he's in Motorhead, and everyone has things going, and we might end up going our separate ways, and maybe in a couple of years we'll play again. But I really hope that the energy we all felt that night and the excitement we all felt, that we could keep that alive again and do it again, because it's a lot of fun doing these shows.